Welcome to BC Poly Hotstove, live from beautiful sunny Victoria, British Columbia on Budget 2020 Day. I'm Maclean Kay, the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and I am joined live and in person.
Can you believe it? Jordan Bateman. I'm out of my little office in Metrotown, into the lockup, and now into the real world, the Victoria bubble. I'm here.
This is where all the real people are.
Yes, well, in fact, on our way over from the budget lockup, we actually saw a few hundred of those real people, forestry workers rallying on the steps of the legislature, discussing their grievances with this current government. So it's been an exciting day here in Victoria.
Well, I mean, there's only one news story that's going to dominate today, and that is the budget.
Well, I hear something happened this morning before we got in.
That's true.
Should we touch on that briefly? Because we know nothing.
Let's talk. Well, actually, we do know.
Okay.
Because
I know nothing.
It has now been reported. Essentially, yesterday, there was word that Extinction Rebellion wanted to stage a citizen's arrest and disrupt the budget speech. What they meant by that, it turns out, was they were going to go to the Premier's residence here in Greater Victoria. They arrived apparently after he had already left.
Okay.
But he turned around by
John goes to work early.
He does. He does indeed, before the protesters show up. And he, I guess the Premier and his RCMP detachment turned around and went back home. The protesters were laying down on his driveway. Don't do that.
His wife was home, wasn't she?
She was indeed. So the Premier went in to be with his wife, and the RCMP, they arrested some people.
I bet you the Premier was real happy about all this.
There is a story on the Vancouver Sun now. Just before we went live, there are some video from the protesters saying that the Premier was extremely angry with them again. My sympathies with the Premier in this case. Yeah. And that he swore at them. I mean, but
look, you don't have to like John Horgan to feel sympathy for him in this situation. That is uncalled for. Yeah. It is unfair. Or kind of rumors about rippled through the stakeholder lockup as we were waiting in the final moments of. Because some of the media had known and told us, there were a lot of, I would call them eco-activist organizations, not Extinction Rebellion, but a lot of organizations that, agree with those guys who are quickly distancing themselves from what went on there. So above and beyond the pale, that is disgusting and should be roundly condemned. And I'm sure the politicians have all been condemning it while we've been locked up.
Yeah, I mean, we've been sort of in a media blackout, not sort of, we have been in a literal media blackout.
But if you're watching this sort of finance, definitely a media blackout. We know nothing.
And so I gather everyone from people like Andrew Wilkinson have spoken up saying this is completely unacceptable. And again, it doesn't matter. You can agree with John Horgan, disagree with John Horgan. Leave his wife alone. Yeah, no, leave his house alone. Come on, he's got an office here. He's got a constituency office. You can protest there. That's ridiculous. But let's talk BC budget because that's what we're talking here. So Maclean, balanced budget, but it's balanced.
By the hair on their chinny chin chins.
227 million, if I remember right.
So imagine spending $55 billion, $60 billion, whatever the budget is now, and it comes down to 227 schmil, whether you're balanced or not balanced.
It's kind of like going to the grocery store with a $100 bill and coming up to the till and finding out your bill is like $99.05.
Yes, not bad. It's not bad. He doesn't get that extra sour key in the back, but razor thin, but notably smaller contingency and forecast allowance than last year. Last year was well over $1 billion. This year, the two are about 700 million. So
that's right.
Not as much room for error.
Nope.
Some interesting, hopeful trends. Look, like half the economic growth being hoped for by the province this year. And, they've come in, I think, at 1.8 is what they're expecting the economy to grow. Remember what inflation is.
That's right.
Well, it's not much beyond inflation. So really, we're stagnant. More than half of that, though, is because of LNG Canada, a project which the NDP are noted for their long-standing support of from the very time it was a glimmer in Christy Clark's eye in 2011. They wanted that project done.
Val Litwin from the BC Chamber of Commerce spoke on this to media and stakeholders earlier today, saying, it's good that the economy is projected to grow very slowly, but again, as you say, more than half of that is LNG Canada, and that the way Val put it was that he's been warning about competitiveness storm clouds on the horizon for a while, but now it appears as though those storm clouds are here. Yeah,
winter is coming is a term we use a lot at ICBA to talk about this. There's some problems in this budget. So one of the interesting projections is that retail sales will grow by 3% this year, BC. But last year they grew by less than 0.5%.
That's right.
So that's a big swing in 1 year. So I have no idea why they would feel so confident that's going to happen. There's also housing starts, and this is one that's near to the independent contractors. We have thousands of residential construction companies working on this. housing starts are expected to drop next year. And most people did expect them to drop because there was a whole bunch in the system, and they all kind of started last year in order to get ahead of Vancouver's new development cost charges. We didn't expect the government to say they're going to drop 22%. Then another 9% the year after that. Then another 6% the year after that.
Yeah.
And this is what, in our news release, we call an affordability bomb. She's lit the fuse here by not fighting with city halls and not pushing for faster approvals for new housing to come on stream. And at the same time, the minister was almost breaking her arm, patting herself on the back for a 3% dip in home values, because that brings it more affordable, 3%. And she wants to do more, but you actually look at the projections, that 3% will be more than eaten up this year by a 6% increase and another 5% next year. So we're going the wrong way on affordability, and it's a kind of this bomb that's going to explode on her in a year or two when people can't buy any houses or any condos because nothing's being started.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to flatten off some of the numbers here just to be simple, but essentially something like 44,000 housing starts were recorded last year. It's down 20% for this year, and it's going to kind of plateau to around almost exactly 30,000 per year in the coming years ahead. Interestingly, in the budget materials, it projected the population of the province to increase by 1 million. So at the very least, it doesn't look as though housing is going to keep up with demand, and I'm sorry, that is going to drive up prices.
I do not know where those folks are going to live. There's other problems too in this budget. So we heard a lot from Todd Stone in the spring session about how people who in low-rise buildings, especially in Vancouver, are paying exorbitant property taxes because it could be developed into a 40-story building, and they get taxes if it is a 40-story building. We heard over and over again from Selena Robinson, municipal affairs, we've got a plan, we've got a plan, we've got a plan. The plan came out, and the plan is provincial downloading to the cities. So these four city governments, they have no control over the BC assessment authority that's assessing these things. And now they're being told, well, if you have a problem with the taxes, talk to them, they'll give you a tax break. And we'll let them give you a tax break. Not a nickel in this budget for those kind of enterprises. And I can only imagine Dan Fiumano over in the Vancouver province, sharpening his knife to stick it into the provincial government on that issue.
I want to talk about three new revenue sources. The provincial government taxes.
Call what they're.
Well, they are. The first is the one that's going to get all the attention. It's the pop tax. We are going to have a sugary carbonated beverage tax here in BC, which it technically is the removal of an exemption, because pop
7% more for pop.
Yeah, is what it means. You don't pay PST on most food. Pop has been considered food, no longer. And that is going to raise, I think, $37 million per year.
Yes, $37 million per year. This is terrible public policy. So the minister gets up and says, well, this is going to provide better health outcomes for young people. First of all, this is a budget that talked more about the scourge of Coca-Cola on young people than it did about opioids, mental health, like things that actually kids, are actually killing kids. Pop ain't killing kids. So, you come in, you're going to have a tax. And basically the idea is we're going to discourage use of drinking of Coca-Cola and other pop products by adding a tax. Well, come on, this has been proven not to work. We had, when I was with the Taxpayers Federation, we brought someone from the Danish Chamber of Commerce who was one of the first countries in the world to have this tax.
Really?
Shane Woodford, if you're watching this, you're not paying that tax anymore because it was also the first country to get rid of that tax. It doesn't work. It doesn't create the health outcomes.
Well, famously, they tried it in New York. With then Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who's obviously a presidential
Little
candidate.
Mikey Bloomberg.
And the interesting thing about this tax is in the States, it was criticized as essentially being a tax on the poor because low-income people drink a disproportionate amount of pop. Now, interestingly, the BC budget provided a gender-based analysis of this and several other tax policies, and it said that men, and especially young men, drink a lot more pop.
Did you get to see this analysis?
Well, it's a note in the budget materials. Yes, it doesn't provide percentages. It just says more men than women drink pop. Now, pop includes things like
tax on men. Oh my God! Don't tell Jordan Peterson.
Well, we did ask. The gender-based analysis of this is interesting. Did the province perform an income-based analysis of this tax policy? And the response was, I don't think they did.
Well. It's bad public policy. Look, it was either 2013 or 2017. I'm pretty sure it's 2013. We, the Taxpayers Federation, got the NDP on record saying they would not support sugary drink taxes. I wonder if it was 2017. I got to go back and check.
It was this government, and Carol James specifically said they were not. It was not something she was looking at.
No, and what made me laugh the hardest was they cited the MSP Replacement Task Force as one of the important backers of this idea. That's the same task force that she didn't allow to finish the work before they brought in the employer health tax and kind of unceremoniously dumped. I believe that was that Lindsay Ted's, was she the one on that, or was it the other? There's a couple of them. Anyways,
to confess, I don't know.
Anyways, not a great look for the finance minister.
The other, and this is the bigger one. It's not going to get as much attention because it's a pop tax is the other one, but is a new income tax bracket for the highest earners.
Yeah, the cha-ching tax.
Yes, which the NDP is very consciously framing as a tax on the 1%.
Yes.
Because taxing the 1% is going to play well, and the party needs to burnish its activist credentials now.
Right. Well, this is after they brought in a tax on the 1% 2 years ago.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So this is a raise, and they were Minister James was asked this in today's lockup by I think Justin McElroy of CBC, basically saying, "Look, if this is good policy, why didn't you do it 2 years ago?" And the minister had a very coy response, which basically amounted to, "We didn't need to then, we need to now."
Yes. And if you take the pop tax and you take this high income tax, what do you get?
You get the surplus.
You get the budget surplus.
Yeah.
So high income earners tax. Look, it's nice to walk around and want to kick the snot out of millionaires. I mean, Maclean, I'm not a millionaire. I do not believe you are a millionaire either.
Not yet.
Not yet. But keep watching our podcast, clicking away. But listen. There comes a point where you're like, what kind of message are we sending to the investment community out there? Like people beyond our borders about, whether or not we, skilled entrepreneurs, risk takers, investors, whether we want them in BC or not. We've now taken this tax from 13% or 12.9 to 16.9 to 20+%.
Yes, I think it's 20.5.
That is a significant hit to the income. And let's be careful here. They will call it a millionaire's tax or 1% tax. The lowest threshold is a household income of $220,000.
That's right.
Which sounds like a lot of money for people like me who grew up in a time where the star right winger of the Vancouver Canucks barely made $220,000, let alone a family. But that's not. It's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. Like if you look at a welder who's working, a highly skilled welder working a lot of extra hours, maybe married to a police officer and she's working a lot of extra hours, you get to $220,000.
Yeah.
Fairly quick. Like it's not that like gasping, $220,000.
Yeah.
Could you only imagine?
It's
like,
yes,
people there.
By any reasonable measure, these people are doing well.
Yes.
We're not talking about the Great Gatsby here necessarily.
No, and in an area where housing prices take a huge consumption of that, where even like a little suburban home is $1 million and a bit, that is a lot to ask for these people. And
it's a pretty big jump.
It's a big jump. It is a big jump. And I think that at some point they call it soak the rich taxes in the States. Like how often can you soak the rich before you actually start pushing them outside our jurisdiction?
On a completely unrelated point, has Pedersen signed an extension yet?
He's only 850 now. I mean, boy, think of his tax. Plus, he's a foreigner, so he has to pay the speculation tax.
We brought up those two because it's almost too neat if you take the sums of those two new taxes.
Yes, and kudos to whichever reporter it was who did the math and figured that out. Because that slipped by me. And
it's basically the surplus. In fact, it's not basically; it is the surplus. It's amazing how neatly it ties up. Yeah. There was a third tax that I'm going to give. This was buried and it's not called this. Chris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation came over and pointed this out to me. There is a requirement now in this budget. I'm going to watch Jordan's face for this. Providers of telecommunication services are now, with revenues in excess of $10,000 in the province, which is nothing, are now required to register as tax collectors. We have had it confirmed that this does include streaming services. That's right, the genesis of a Netflix and Spotify tax.
What? No tax rate yet, though?
No tax rate. They have to register as tax collectors if they have an income in the province of greater than $10,000. So and again, it's referred to as communications and telecommunication services.
Yeah.
And the listing is on page 64 of the budget. It literally says something like requirement to register. That's all it says.
Right.
And then it's broken down into this. Chris Sims pointed it out. Full credit to Chris. And had it confirmed that this does in fact include streaming services.
Does it include little media outlets named after blackfish? Oh my God. Like the Netflix, like these governments, they just cannot say no. On our way up here, we were joking around because we're in the legislative press gallery, and on our way by, for some reason, we passed a cash machine I was like, it's that's what Carol James calls the taxpayer. And yet, it is kind of true. Like, government sees us as, as cash machines. Like a Netflix tax, which has nothing to do with British Columbia, Disney Plus, all this, now you can start assigning 7% provincial sales tax on these things.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think somebody in the national media pointed this out, is that we don't know what will happen if, for example, the province of British Columbia goes to, let's say, Disney Plus and says, we want you to register as an income collector. What if Disney Plus says no? Yeah. What happens then?
Well, Disney is known for loving to work with people and groups. And
well, it's not completely understood.
No, I know,
and then what happens next? Does the province then mandate internet service providers to block Disney Plus? That's not something democracies do.
No.
That would be a very ugly situation. And
someone's going to try this. Someone's going to fight this, right? Like someone's going to say no. And then, however, if they wanted to tax BC Poly Talk with Bill Thielman, I'm all for it. All for it. Okay.
We like BC Poly.
I'm just kidding. He was in the media lockup, but
it was good to see Bill.
Yeah, only registered lobbyist in the media lockup, but was greatly noted in the stakeholder area. So we'll see if that continues next year. Minor thing, I noticed a difference from last year to this year in the budget lockup. Fewer of the little yellow. So a couple of years ago, when the NDP took over, all of a sudden, I kind of noticed that every reporter had this poor BC government staffer who had to tag along and I guess take copious notes about who they interviewed. Yeah. There seemed to be fewer of them this year.
Yeah. Well, yes, they did this last year, and what they assigned every member of the media a minder or a runner, who
a babysitter.
If you had a question for one of the experts, they would be the one to go and get it for you. I'm going to be totally honest. The guy they assigned to me was great. He was very helpful. Sure. This year, they didn't do that. They had people roving around, I think the way more had been done in the past. It wasn't hard to get information if you wanted it. There was enough staff members there. All you had to do was kind of sit back and look like you were looking around and someone came running over.
Yeah. Anyways, it was an interesting illustration. The stakeholder side was packed.
Yes.
Packed. And more and more of these NDP friendly groups. Although I'll say this, the BC Teachers Federation, I can no longer consider NDP friendly. The table I will remember most from this budget, the little graph, is K-12 education funding. And it kind of goes up a little bit next year, and then it flatlines. There's only a $7 million difference between year 2 of the budget and year 3 of the budget. And you could just smell the smoke coming from the Teachers Federation, because that's not just like we're not getting more than 222. This is like we're not getting anything more. We're not even getting inflation for the education.
I think that might be the only question that Carol James was asked twice. Yeah. Does this mean that there's no room in the kitty for extra money for the teachers? She was very, very clear and direct. Yeah. The mandate is the mandate.
Yeah, the mandate is the mandate.
2 and 2, which is the increases over the next 2 years. Yeah. And so we'll see what happens next.
First of all, if it's really been done with a gender-based inquiry, then it should have been a people date, not a mandate. Second of all, teachers are generally female, so this is actually hurting them on that gender basis. I'm not saying generally, predominantly female, I think.
I think that's accurate.
It's fair to say. And so, that was tough, and it's always so nice. It's nice as someone who, had to watch the BC Teachers Federation take swing after swing after swing at the previous government for years. It's nice to see them have to do the same as this government. Like, maybe the problem, it's like that Star Trek episode, Beverly Crusher, everyone's being crazy, and she's like, maybe it's not me who's crazy. Maybe it's everyone else is crazy. Maybe Teachers Federation, it's you. Maybe it's you.
Well, I mean, how many negotiated settlements have the BCTF reached with the NDP government? The NDP government's plural, I should say. I think the answer is zero.
Zero, right.
So it's...
PD Fassbender, 6-year deal, not looking so bad now, is he?
It's kind of astonishing in retrospect. It's even more astonishing as time goes by.
Yeah, it is. It is. We may never see a 6-year deal with that group again.
Never.
What else is going on? So small business. This was really for small businesses who are reeling under higher taxes, the employer health tax, for example, lots of red tape, and a definite climate among government agencies where it's fair to say they are employer unfriendly. There was nothing in this budget. And you mentioned Valley when the BC Chamber Conference at the beginning. The Vancouver Board of Trade perplexingly gave this a B-. This was
I didn't even see that.
A C+ or C at best. But it had nothing for small business owners. No relief, no concern about that economic engine, no discussion of that economic engine. Hey, if you're a contractor, like the ones we represent, you're really wondering, right? Like, this government is not here to help me in any way.
No, and as we were alluding to before about there likely might have been a deficit without these two new taxes. One thing that's also got little off. A lot of things get buried in budgets because it's literally, you should have seen the stack of documents I brought back here. But spending continues to outpace growth, revenue, I should say. And so if that trend continues, and there's no reason to think it will change significantly, we might be in the same situation a year from now. Now, things can happen to mitigate that, but the long-term trends aren't great.
No,
they're very flat.
Debt to GDP ratio is shooting up.
Yeah.
Debt to revenue ratio is shooting up and getting close to those 100% marks where everyone's like, oh.
I wanted to mention debt.
Yeah.
Because the government is borrowing a substantial amount of money this year. It's actually jumped quite a bit. The taxpayer-supported debt to finance the government's capital plan, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I apologize.
So it's $6 billion this year.
Yeah, and it's a jump. It's last year debt borrowing financed about a third of the capital plan. This year it's more than 60%.
Yeah.
That's in 1 year.
Yeah.
And that's projected to continue over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
So
and there's nothing new in there. This is all stuff that's been previously announced.
Yeah.
There's not a penny in there for construction on the Massey Tunnel. There's a little bit of money in there to slap some white paint on it or whatever Claire Trevena claims is going to help save lives in the tunnel. But there's not a nickel in the 3-year plan for the thing. They made a big deal about how they were going to go from a 3-year to a 5-year transportation infrastructure plan. Didn't see that in there. It was in year 4, year 5 for the Massey. Now, good news for our side, for the ICBA side, no new community benefit agreements.
That's
announced. Still sticking to those 3, Patello, Broadway Subway, and the Highway 1 expansions. That is not surprising simply because, that plan has driven up costs on those 3 projects by about $1 billion, which would have been a nice down payment on a Massey Tunnel, don't you think?
Oh, very much so.
So, when you're staying in traffic in the Massey, thank John Horgan and thank his sweetheart deal with the building trades unions, because that's where that money went. And if Christy Clark's Bridge, as they like to call it, had continued on, it'd be 66% complete today. We'd be about a year away from opening.
One thing I do want to share from an inside point of view from the budget lockup, and this is later.
Yes. Okay. Oh, wow.
So I got to sit next to Vaughn Palmer, which is, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Vaughn Palmer is one of the legitimately unique and irreplaceable people in BC politics because, at one point I counted because I was fascinated. There were 9 government staffers in a ring around him as he Socrates-like fired off questions. And then budget is one of those things where you can get so lost in the details. This is not what Vaughn did. But he would he'd ask this person about the debt issue. And then this person, he would say, I noticed the Burnaby Secondary School, the estimate's gone up by 30%. Why is that? And it's just, you noticed that?
Ooh,
wow, that's impressive. Being near Vaughn Palmer is an education in and of itself.
Yeah, well, it reminds me when I was a very young reporter, I went to a high school basketball championship at the Agrodome, and Howard Samara was covering it. And Howard was so kind to me, let this little 19-year-old Langara college student sit with him for 3 days, and I learned how to cover basketball.
That's cool.
And that's what it's like being around Vaughn Palmer, like the best of the best, the guy with all the institutional knowledge. And look, I'll tell you what happens. We wait, everyone writes their press releases. Vaughn gets up and asks the first question. Everyone pauses and goes, crap, I got to rewrite my press release.
It's true.
The narrative has changed. Vaughn is on to something else. And, it's a tribute. Like, guys like Vaughn Palmer, that's, that kind of longevity, that kind of role is disappearing in today's media.
Yeah.
I can't, he's not, probably won't be replaced, and certainly not by anyone who has that kind of heft, right? Like,
absolutely not. There's no one to replace someone like Vaughn Palmer. You can't.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so glad to see a guy like Les Lane still come into budget lockouts, even though he's retired, although he seems to be writing just as much as he used to. And, you're like, you can't replace that kind of institutional knowledge, right? Like, like I love the Orca, I subscribe to BC Today and all these new publications around, but there's nothing like that.
Of course.
Like the grizzled veteran, you get the, even now, like I'm sitting there and we didn't do much media because there was nothing for construction in this budget. I'm not sure, what do you want to say? Well, this is a budget on nothing. I can throw it a sound bite, but it's not going to be helpful. Just sitting there and, Keith Baldry looks across. He gives me the nod. And I'm like, he likes me. Keith once called me and was something my wife still said there as well, not an insignificant person.
Oh, well.
So
I'm amazed that's not your bio.
I know, exactly. It should be. It could be not an insignificant person.
Never said that about me.
I know. So this is the kind of stuff that, this is my 11th budget. I counted it up last night.
Wow.
11th budget lockup. And this one, I've been there for exciting ones where, we got the MSP cut in half and, where we got rid of the Pacific Carbon Trust and things I worked on directly. Been to ones where, really probably could have just stayed home and watched your coverage after. But, it's always exciting. And it's a great networking thing as well to talk to a bunch of other folks.
It's quite an event.
Who are in the room together.
And where does this one rank in terms of excitement and interest?
For me, bottom third for sure.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it. Like you could tell by the media questions, there was no unifying. And I know you're trying to get as many different topics around the.
That's true.
It's a unifying thing. No one really asked about this child tax.
No.
This child allowance thing.
Much to the NDP's chagrin, I think that they want that to be one of the signature. We haven't even mentioned it.
Yeah.
But they want it to be one of the signature planks of this budget.
So, if you make up to $100,000, sounds like, or something, as a household, you'll get some sort of monthly payment for your children up to age 18 instead of age 6. Okay. That's fine. You do wonder, I don't know. It's so hard. The thing I laugh about the most is these guys become finance ministers and women become finance ministers, and they all turn into the same talking points, right? Budgets are about priorities, said Kevin Falcon, said Carol James today, said Mike Dion, said, every finance minister says Carol Taylor, every finance minister you can ever talk about. Well, you can remember, McLean, budgets are about priorities. No kidding.
Really? Thank you, Dr. Insight.
You. That will lead my story. Film at 11, right? It is pretty funny to see that. But this budget, not a lot in it. Certainly concern for small business, concern for our residential home builders. Mm-hmm. Commercial and industrial and institutional building will continue. But, if you have a small roofing company that specializes in home roofs, there's not a lot of positive news in here for you.
No.
Also, there was a natural gas tax increase, carbon tax increase on natural gas that kind of got hidden away. But, for people like me who already pay more in tax than I do in the natural gas, it makes me wonder why I need to pay even more. These are perplexing questions. And I like going home on the ferry and then reading everyone's tweets and trying to figure out what the angles are.
And speaking of which, you have a ferry you need to catch if you're going to get back to get back away from civilization.
I know, exactly. Me and the loggers, we're going to go together on the 5 o'clock ferry. I doubt there'll be any Extinction Rebellion people on that ferry, but if they are, I will immediately call the Premier's office. And
they are run on diesel.
They are run. There you go. All right. Well, anything else? Is that it?
No, I think it's been an interesting day, and it will continue to be an interesting day. I look forward to I'll be publishing my thoughts on this later for everyone to read. But in the meantime, this has been BC Budget Day 2020.